Okay, this session is on games and multi-touch games. And I wanted to create this session because there's a lot of interest in the community for it, but we have not actually been tasked as developers in the multi-touch team to actually do any work with games. So what we would like to do is keep any game developers in the community closely in sync with us as we work with the upstream toolkits and of course Xorg, and make sure that at every step of the way, as they want to push the edge of the technology, we can support them. So we just want to brainstorm about the various things, the various projects that folks could do in the open source community. And so when they come up on IRC, we can share with them and give them pointers, show them a document, just encourage them essentially to get involved and start driving this technology forward in the consumer market. So it looks like Gabi's down again. I think Bill put together a bunch of notes for us. And yeah, we can discuss and take questions from IRC if folks are there. So
do we have any game developers in the IRC audience?
I do not know. I can ask.
I think maybe I just did.
Oh, cool. Am I not right here?
So just some thought, maybe if you could turn some toy game, add the multi-touch to some toy game that might give some inspiration as well as example code. So like that's GTK based, right? So if you're adding multi-touch to the GTK widgets, maybe you could just make the cars behave.
Right.
Building routines, scale the cars in some game, whatever.
There is different sorts of games. For example, the static games, you have a view of the map and you can control. I think that this is the main, the best use of multi-touch games. I have seen a lot of uses in first person, and that wasn't can be used with such games. But even with this, we have many problems because in such games it runs in full screen, so it takes all the input for itself, and in that case.
That's the old notes.
Yeah, I just tried refreshing.
Yeah, open up the new ones again and copy the old one in there because it looks like the server lost it. Yeah. Say, you'll have to reopen it now. Awesome, thanks, man.
So it takes all the input and based on frameworks like OpenGL, and sometimes it takes the input directly from the low layers. And for example, if we are building the UDS stack, they may don't use it at all. They take input and so. I don't know if we prepared, for example, the gesture organizer to be used with them. I don't know as library.
If we set up the gesture recognizer to work with games and the kind of demands that games have, I would imagine that pretty much everything you want to do in the game you can do right now, or we'll be able to do with the next version of Grail. It's just that there's an awful lot of work that's going to have to be done to interpret the gestures at the application level. Even with the standard GTK support added, a game is still going to want to do a lot of customized. It's going to be like the CAD programs you see and whatnot to use touch. It's all highly specialized. So I imagine that the game developers will have to really want to have touch enabled and do a lot of that work themselves.
When it comes to a lot of games, they choose not to use the main toolkits like GTK or Qt. They choose to SDL or one of the other
libraries that were written more for game.
Yeah, exactly. Very lightweight, but you end up doing a lot of the infrastructure yourself.
One thought, game engines might prefer lower latency recognition of their gestures.
That's often very important for game.
Yeah, that's certainly, I don't know why they think that.
Well, they think they need it.
Still, you could say gaming mode and suddenly you catch their attention.
Yeah, but what we really need to do is work with people like the STL. Thank you. The STL guys to try and do it now.
So how should it be done? So, like all the libraries like STL or OpenGL libraries to use Grave.
Yeah.
Well,
they would load.
SDL is very modular, and OpenGL is
OpenGL is just
partly
rendering raw.
Yeah, so that's partly partitioned from the user. You can set options to use GL if you want to, but if you don't,
can
you
get
just get
rendering
what you
context.
get. Yeah.
But SDL itself usually is used for all the input.
Right.
So it's got joystick support and mouse support, that sort of thing. So that's where we want to be.
So it would just be SDL gesture.
Yeah.
For someone who will want to create a game or get an already made game and add sort of multitouch in that game, what he should modify?
The problem is most of these guys, when they write the games, if they're not doing something like Isle Riot or a GNOME game that's explicitly written to use the toolkit, is they toss everything out, just write everything. So when they're using something like SDL, they'll end up just doing it all themselves. They write a game, they don't write an engine.
So I guess
So it's a matter of you have to look at what they've done, right? Everyone's different.
But they could load up the Grail library and they could load the guys.
Yes, as long as we provide the API, that's what I'm saying with the SDL under our gesture library.
Right.
That's a good way of getting it.
and you could just add a wrapper to it.
Yeah, that's all I would do.
If they're willing to use the Grail that's actually running on the system.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
So opt in, opt out. There's nothing we can do.
Well, they would then probably incorporate it directly into their just translate,
So part of the question of how painful is it is what do they want to do with multitouch? How does multitouch change the game? If we're talking map, move, and scaling, those probably are just function calls or setting variables, and that would be trivial. But when we start talking about the ability to independently control multiple units with different hands and fingers, then that's probably going to change a lot of the game code.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I don't know. I'm thinking, for example, if you're running something like Open City, that's a city sim, where you want to zoom in and then you want to, map out regions where you want to make it whatever, industrial or whatever, or you want to zoom in and out of the map or rotate.
Strokes for changing modes.
Yeah,
like
but I'm sure those are all just already in there as set to rotate. So that sort of thing's easy. But if you've got something where you're moving troops around, you want to grab all these horsemen and move them over there. Yeah, it's going to be. It's hard.
Is it the use case where the developer need to create another recognition for himself and not use UDS?
I don't think so. I would imagine they would be able to use UTouch, or the parts of UTouch they could. Like I would imagine they could use Grail just fine. They could use Guys just fine.
What are you thinking about this up on IRC? SDL is still in widespread use.
Yeah. There's
It's used a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of games that come out that I've played recently actually that require SDL download.
And there's a few competing toolkits that do the same thing. And everyone's saying, oh, use these are newer. But the fact is, SDL has been around and it's
easy to use.
It's used.
What is the IRC channel, sorry?
It is Ubuntu-UDS-on-air 8.
It's great.
What?
Lower left corner of the IRC window.
So
I just thought that was like the username or something, I didn't know.
Yeah, it's not the channel name first. I'm going to first.
Stephen, can you load the link? There is some links of use case.
Sorry, Fagan, has our volume gotten better for you? I imagine you can probably hear me pretty clearly. I'm a loudspeaker.
So,
Okay, so Iqbal and Stephen, when you guys speak, can you bring the volume up?
Yeah, I'm trying.
Or just some water? Really, just some water? Okay, so Iqbal, you just asked a question. What was the question you asked?
It's just, we are talking about Multitouch in game. SDL is the most used library. Yes, but SDL 2.0, I have heard about that from years ago,
Yeah.
and we never see it. So I'm not sure, even if we do contribution,
If it will get merged, right,
never, I think.
right.
I think nobody take the project. That's why Pgame have done all the binding on
Right,
SDL.
right.
They try to do Pgame 2
Right.
without SDL. And we write all in Python, but
Yes.
this is not resolving the first part.
Right.
That SDL is not maintained anymore.
Well, it's still maintained, but they're not putting out
Maybe
new
it is a-
features
it's a-
because,
maybe it is a
Yes, yes, it's maintained just.
well, it's actually a lot of packages.
Right. That's not even sort of like the collection of packages of the business deal is maintained as packages in the system, but I don't believe there's any new development happening. I haven't seen any.
Yeah, they're still,
Gestures in SDL.
Really?
Yeah.
Looking at the header file, yeah.
well, there's an effort to put some in. There was a Google Summer of Code thing to add them in this year. I don't know where that went.
Right.
But, yeah, they're fixing bugs. So
Yeah, they have it in the.
if they need
Just look
gestures.
at SDL.
Okay, I just went onto the wiki page with the docs and they didn't list it. so-
Yeah, click, it's on the event hand link, the link goes up on
All right.
IRC.
Yeah,
At the
okay.
top, click the SDL events.
Okay,
Header
so
file.
go far enough into it.
so there is another.
You have a URL for the demo?
You don't have, sorry?
A link for the demo?
Oh yeah, it's somewhere.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
Which will allow you to do something.
But it was, I mean, it was a one-shot thing for Ubisoft. It was Gmail, Multitouch events translated to keyboard or something.
The question as to whether you need gestures in games, well, is your imagination.
Did we get an answer to game developers in the chat room?
No one spoke up and said, yes, I'm a game developer. But yeah, if I had to do a game right now, I would use my game. Right.
TS Touch is that fingerprinting for binding.
Yeah, the thing that on some of the game development boards, they recommend you start with Pygame because the learning curve. Exactly. And everyone wants to use C++, but most of the experts say no. Back off, start with Pygame, go from there. So if we make sure that PyMT at least gets integrated with Pygame,
Right.
that probably goes a long way towards providing the basic thing. You got to get the game developers while they're young.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like heroin, right?
So that's kind of a segue into PyMT. You guys have a gesture recognizer, correct?
Yes, it's $1. Just your recognition.
Doesn't have touch gesture.
Yes.
What would it take for IMT to support building, say, like the libgrail? Would you need like bindings for libgrail on that create, or probably 2 games?
Yes. Yes. C-types is very easy to use. So. It's not a problem, just how we can communicate with Greg.
Right.
I wasn't aware about all the things. So.
Right.
I think I don't know, I haven't written many games, but I think if I set out to write a game, unless it's sort of some small little fun game, like Minesweeper or something, I'm trying to create an immersive experience. And if that's my goal, I'm not sure I want to use, I'm not sure standard gestures is what I'm going for.
Right.
But like when we're talking about I want the controls to sort of be very custom based on that.
But at the very least, multi-touch.
Yeah, but I think I'd use raw touch lines probably.
So you got that like IMD, right?
Yeah.
But is Grail a good conduit to get appropriately transformed multi-touch coordinates?
Yeah, well, actually, they would probably just use the raw events
Okay.
from IMD.
It seems like, there's different kind of things that you might want to do. I mean, somebody might want to use, the kind of, iPhone, iPad type gestures, but then like some of, the just normal swipes and rotates and all this kind of stuff. And then, I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a game years ago called Black and White that was more into like the magic gestures.
Right.
And
That
so
was
Spectrum and IRC.
I see, okay.
That didn't. Well, there was some grab and move the scenery, but a lot of it was drawing symbols.
Yeah, so,
Hang on, real quick, may I interrupt? Let's just go around the guys that are up front here, introduce yourselves real quickly.
oh, sorry. My name's Cody Russell. I'm on the UDS team, and actually I used to work for a game company years ago, and I worked on Civilization 4, I think. So, that's, since we were talking about games.
Great. And
I'm Stephen Webb, and I'm involved in the UDS team doing the API.
he's got an ARM background, et cetera. So. GL as well. So.
Yeah, I do hobby game development.
Rafi Rubin, have opinions about things, I guess. I'm academic and have some involvement with UDS at various levels of the stack.
Right, Rafi helped us get started on the gesture recognition engine, and he wrote the N-Trig drivers for the hardware that we've been using as the platform. And then I'm speaking as Duncan McGregor. I am the engineering manager for the UDS team.
And Ted Blavia, I'm also in the Multitouch team, and have made Gene, which leads gesture event and inject keystrokes to applications. So legacy support Multitouch applications.
Who else is Stefan Chetty? You might have heard him.
Speak up.
He was asking if it was speaking for instance.
Sorry, yeah, I was.
It's okay. Just introduce yourself. Yeah.
Oh, as well. In this context?
Yeah, there's guys online asking who everyone's speaking.
As far as Ubuntu is concerned, I'm the guy who wrote a bunch of HID drivers for multi-touch devices. And I also happen to own some shares in a company that has been doing multi-touch for a few years now.
Right. Stefan,
For serious games.
Some of which are for really serious games, and some of which have been for funny games.
Stefan is deeply involved in a lot of the stuff that we've done from the beginning, and he and I consulted on Touch and various resources for Touch from the start. And then we have the PyMT guys here.
Hey, I'm Mathieu, developer of PyMT.
And Thomas, I'm a developer back in PhD student of ours.
There you go. That should be everybody so far. That's been fun.
So, can I ask a question to Cody? Put yourself back in your mind of your Civ 4 days. What would have sold you on getting you interested in trying out this thing, seeing how it works with the code that you were writing?
I don't understand, I guess.
So what could we have done if you were still a game developer to convince you to try?
I think having good documentation and having maybe a few demos or something like that. I don't know, I think...
So just being out there would be enough?
I think, yeah, all right, so I guess like in like I don't know what's going on in like the development on like these devices like iPad and stuff, but you know, when it was, you know, PC and console games and stuff, everybody is at GDC, you know, showing off their technology and showing off what's going on. We can't really do that. Well, okay, well, I'm not going to say whether we can or not, but I guess I did, but I take that back. But so I guess, yeah, it's just kind of, you know, being out there and I'm not sure what else. You know, having maybe some demos. What we could do is we could, if we have a couple demos, we can, or if some people in the community, you know, come up with something kind of cool, then I think we should have like Jonah's team trying to make a big deal out of it and, you know, show it up not just on like, you know, Ubuntu Planet and stuff, but try to get it onto like some gaming related places and get awareness out there that, you know, we're creating sort of a platform.
Do you still have contacts in the gaming industry?
No, not really. I mean, I only worked there for like a year.
So if someone wants to, I don't know, for example, in other platforms, we have only one API to develop on the main API to make the development on the platform. Don't know if for games we can push something like that. If someone wants to make a game, we support only one thing. Like, I don't know, maybe by game, add this sort of Multitouch inside it.
I'm going to throw out one game. Have you played Warzone 2100? It's an old 3D game that went open source a few years ago. And the interactions will be relatively simple. We'll be talking about sliding around the map, zooming, perspective change, and then just a few buttons. I don't know how bad the code is, but very simple interaction with it.
NetHack. Can you put judges
Yes.
in
Okay, I was not saying that. Yes, multi-touch NetHack.
Yeah, so Dennis brought up a question just now. Is there any need for gesture engines in the game at all? Is it easier just to implement the gesture recognition in the game by yourself?
So I think that's kind of what I was trying to get at. No, you're right, but I think maybe it's like, if you're thinking about like the infrastructure that's there, like instead of me having to implement it myself again, maybe it'd be nice if instead of getting the gesture events the way I usually do, if I have a full screen game and I want to handle everything myself, maybe I can still pipe certain input that I select to the library and then get back whether it was a gesture event or not.
Actually, one case was for our gesture libraries or the thread safe. Do you know? Because
they're in a separate process right now. So,
but like the library calls that a game might make. Is what I guess I'm
Well, because the current Geist API uses a callback mechanism. Yeah, they're going to be called back in the context of the event loop.
Okay.
So as far as that goes, you're on your own to make the thread safe. But that's
Okay. Just because I think it's pretty common sometimes for a game to do rendering and other stuff like in different threads, I think.
Yeah.
So I just figured I'd check and see how we can.
In my experience running games, often you don't even want a library. Like just having, depending on how complex the code is, if you just have a snippet of code doing this, you just copy and paste that and change it a little bit. That's more useful than trying to give, you know, a library call.
Right.
So here are the raw events, and here's how you might turn this into a Zoom event.
Right.
And they go, okay, plug it together, twist it around a bit.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So maybe just just snippets might be what people can develop for.
Yeah, yeah.
People talking about music games.
Yeah, like a classic example was using like a mouse to be a trackball, and you don't use the library. You normally just go to Google or get the matrix sorted out and sort of, you know, a 20-line function you paste.
Right.
So the other thing is it is about commercial games support. For someone who have games and wants to buy a game, he can't find something in the store, so it needs to get it from them. And many people talks now about the Steam, which is software. You just install games directly from it, and it handles all updates and other things. I don't know if you can talk with them to put together.
Well, there was a rumor that they had a Linux client, and then they announced officially they weren't going to support Linux.
Steam.
Valve.
They say that they are not working, but like some screenshots or some info.
This is just what I've heard. Are they just looking for someone to do the work for them?
Well, the tricky part is I think they might already have a Steam.
This is what the rumor was.
But you know, what do you do with the Steam client if you don't have games?
Yeah, we've got like 3 games distributed on it.
So, Gabi went down on the touch palm.
If somebody's looking for a really good idea for a game to do, somebody should try to recreate Ragdoll Kung Fu using touch.
For example, here, if we have games which use low level reads input from low level layers, things like Gin won't work because it's transient through the Pro X.
And with Unity, we're going to be, with Unity running on Compiz, we're doing OpenGL, everything's going to be GL based, and you know, we're going to have to do a whole new API for that. I mean, they're going to be using guides, but they're going to be doing essentially what any game would have to do, is, you know, add support for recognizer and bring in the gestures, so, and it's all GL based, so that might offer a nice analogy, to your point for folks. Gabi back up now.
So the current UDS stack doesn't distinguish between users, so and games. We have sometimes more than usual.
So for the folks who are in IRC and can't see, Stephen is demoing his GL gesture hackery that he's been working on. This is essentially a concept to help drive some of the gesture definitions we're doing in the API itself. And having to write against GL is actually quite helpful for this. But he's got his magic trackpad out and is manipulating a cube on screen for us to see with gestures, and identifies various drags that he's doing and whatnot. You can get this code. It's open source. It's up on Launchpad. Launchpad/UQ. So you can download it and run it and check it out for yourselves.
So if we want to push for a game platform for Ubuntu, we should use between, for example, PyMT or maybe QML things. We should provide something unique to not many choices.
Yes. QML is an excellent choice. It's very easy and quick to develop in QML. PyMT is also another good choice. I think as long as we provide folks with code snippets, demonstrations, then you should be able to get them up and running very quickly.
Another thing in games, maybe we should support focus on single platform, for example,
I think it's generally a good idea if you want to have success in any given endeavor, but we're not actually driving. Like if we were driving an initiative, we could really do a good job with that. And folks could get on board, but unfortunately we don't have the time or resources to drive that from within the UDS team. And so we can encourage folks to choose one path or the other, but we really should leave the ecosystem open to evolve and not make a decision because we're not actually doing the driving for it. So, but if we were a game development, or if we had an initiative to do game development, then we could really, make a decision and go with it and provide tons and tons of examples, and everybody can benefit from that. But
what about having a contest?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that.
That would be great, but again, we don't have the resources for that. Like we actually have some funding set aside for contests for improving gesture recognition algorithms and whatnot, and offering regular prizes for that sort of stuff. This will be announced at some point in the future, but we don't have any sort of budget for gaming or encouraging gaming. The direct benefits to what we're doing right now and the timeline we're on are too far removed.
But we could, not offer that kind of compensation, but we can also like more in terms of just like promotion and things like that.
We could definitely.
If somebody comes up with like a really cool something, then at least we can try to make them more famous.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, seriously, it's like if somebody comes up with something cool, I will definitely blog about them. I get a lot of readership on my blog, and that's a ton of free press. So, any non-monetary rewards, I'm definitely all for.
Just have a community voting,
ranking, and we don't have to have number one because we just need one. Just one.
But the Pygame community does the Pi Week thing, where they have a game in a week. You develop a game. I think it's Pygame. Maybe just the winners that I've seen have done theirs in Pygame. Maybe it's more broad than that. But anyway, there are definitely community competitions where you have a week to develop a particular game and you get recognition for this and a monetary prize. So
maybe contact the organizers of these and encourage.
Yeah, maybe.
An extra encouragement.
Yeah.
We talked about doing something like that for Pygame. I don't know, counting prices out there.
Right.
Yeah. Do they give out prizes for Pygame?
You said the program to
Give a free one to download.
to do that. It's an international thing.
Yeah, there's issues too with giving out prizes for contests.
You can win the respect and admiration of your peers.
There's more than respect to that,
I have peers.
If your game's good enough, we'll record a video of Mark playing it and put it on YouTube.
But if we want to push for this, then we should fix.
Well, one of the advantages of that is you can have an exit questionnaire for all the people who partake in the contest and ask, okay, what did you think about the multi-touch? Give us feedback, good, bad.
Right. And in fact, so you would probably start hearing about it before next week.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Maggie.
Todd, you want to?
So let's see here. What else do we want to cover? Regular drivers.
There is also something of communication between many devices. For example, you can have games which run on each device, but if two players are near each other, they should make something. They should can share things between them, and also
doesn't PlayStation have that ability, where if like two PlayStation guys are close to each other, you can link up and play?
Yeah, do that with iPods.
So I don't know if the other player can how we will get the message sequence from the other player.
How you get the what?
How to send the message sequence.
Well, you would send a raw event, so it would be just the way normal games communicate with each other. And there's mechanisms, UMP, to discover other machines, so on and so forth.
Well, you use it for discovery, but the actual communication of state is just you're exchanging state.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
they
just
can say the same thing on the fire sale.
Thinking from Stefan's comments, there's a suite of educational games called G Capri, I think, which.
What's a telepathy tape?
I think it's like the internet tape.
Is it sort of like out of the Matrix, or you just stick the whole thing right in the back of your head?
It's.
I think if they use the device.
Telepathy is what Ubuntu uses for IM. Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't think that's good.
Yeah,
Which is welcome. No worries.
Anyways, G Capri might be an easy set of developers to sell on the idea, because a lot of it is teaching children just the basic mechanics of moving a mouse around and using a computer. So the ability to touch two shapes, or something like that, they might be interested in playing.
Well,
Kids get the screen all sticky.
The thing that's it's actually kind of interesting is because of the Software Center, there's an extraordinary opportunity for enterprise game developers. There are a dearth of games in Linux right now, and any enterprise game developer who wanted to either start porting his or her game from iPhone or Android to Linux would all of a sudden find themselves the top, purchased software on the store, because there's nothing in the store and there are very few games on Linux. So if they started doing this now, an individual or two could make an enormous amount of money.
Well, maybe the first step there is to create a multi-touch game section in the Software Center, because once it's there.
So now there's a lot of opportunity here. Actually, this is the last touch session of the day. I did that on purpose so that we could always have the last session of either socialize or play in your rooms.
Fagan, I think the Software Center is somewhat different from the package repositories.
Yeah.
So the categories would be a different
It's still
mechanism.
an application category from the packaging point of view, but
It would just go under games if it had to fit into the normal categories.
So you're specifically talking about the Software Center, so you may be aware of
Oh,
details
okay.
that we're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. Well, does anybody have anything else? Any wisdom from the game industry to share with us, Cody? Any wisdom from the GTK?
Notice he's not in the game industry anymore.
That's right.
Wisdom enough.
That's right.
Is there any wisdom in the game industry?
The first lesson you learn is get out as quick as you can.
Yeah, there's one exception to that rule. Every person that I've talked to who's ever worked in the game industry has said the same thing, with the exception of Jay on the DX team. He was in the game community, and he's actually the guy who's driving a lot of the much stuff that on the basis of GLC community. But he loved it in the game industry. He had a great time.
I've had young children play with various touchscreens of mine over the years. It's okay.
You cracked your in the button?
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah, so sad.
Maybe the last thing is, for example, we have example on desktops, on PC, on maybe on tablets, and games can't be the same on the video. Yeah. I mean, some games can't be played on.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
good.
a good
How to
migrate between those. A good example is actually a Spore. They created obviously the large PC game and console game, but then they have a different one for the mobile and whatnot. And they provide a limited functionality or a limited part of the gameplay on a device. So.
Same with things like Sims.
Right.
Same sort of thing.
in software center,
We don't distinguish between platform. Yeah, we don't. So that might be a good thing. Of course, we don't have a tablet right now, and we don't have a phone. So
I think you're going to take games on the server because that's.
but yes, that's definitely something we should.
Requires
GL support.
There actually is a company that's working on something like that. I don't know how this is supposed to work, but they're basically working on like some sort of a gaming thing that just goes through. It's like delivered through cable or something.
Right, but you're not using the server itself as the front end. There's these things which basically send the video, stream the video, which is rendered on the server. I forgot the name of it, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know the name.
You could run some wicked net app with gesture support on the main thing.
Okay, that's 3 times. I expect to see the code in a month.
All right, guys, I think that's it. We're out early. It's only 5 minutes left in the session. Unless anybody has questions or ideas to share.
Cross number of figures that you drive across the screen.
Genius to impart. All right, folks on IRC, thanks so much for joining and for all the questions.